The revelation of Order 66 for one squad of clone troopers. The dense, towering trees of Kashyyyk loomed over the forest floor, casting eerie shadows in the fading light. The air was thick with the cries of distant Wookiees and the muffled blasts of distant skirmishes. Commander X-536 stood in a clearing, his armor caked in mud, sweat dripping down his scarred face. He knelt beside the body of his former general, her green lightsaber now extinguished in the ferns, her chest smoking from a direct blaster shot. One more shot, right between the eyes, he thought. Even in death, the Jedi felt like a threat. Execute Order 66, Palpatine's words echoed in his helmet. But for the clones, something had shifted long before that. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were hunters, cutting down their prey without a second thought. The forest was their killing ground, and they had become the monsters that prowled within. It had been weeks since Order 66 was executed on Kashyyyk, but the battle hadn't ended. Commander X-536 led Alpha Squad, an elite group of clone troopers once revered for their precision and loyalty. Now they were stranded deep in the forest, hunting down the last surviving Jedi in the wilds of Kashyyyk. Day by day, the dark forest seemed to close in, whispering to them, mocking them with the silence of the dead. The squad had changed. They no longer spoke of their brothers lost in battle or their victories. Instead, they saw ghosts. Every shadow, every rustling leaf reminded them of the Jedi they had gunned down. X-536 was the worst of them, haunted by the image of his former general, kind, wise, and utterly trusting, falling beneath his blaster. His mind replayed her final words over and over again. "You were my friend." The jungle of Kashyyyk mirrored their unraveling psyches, dark, chaotic, and filled with unseen dangers. The Wookiees had turned to guerrilla warfare, picking off clones one by one. But even more frightening were the strange occurrences that plagued Alpha Squad. Helmets vanished in the night, equipment failed without warning, and the forest itself seemed to turn against them, as if the very planet knew their guilt and wanted to wipe them out. Then came the worst of it. After days of hunting, Alpha Squad cornered the surviving Jedi in the depths of the forest, hidden within the thick canopy. When they breached the grove, they expected a fearsome warrior. Instead, they found a child, a Padawan barely old enough to hold her lightsaber steady. She stood trembling, eyes wide with fear. X-536 hesitated. He had killed dozens of Jedi, but something about this girl, her innocence, froze him in place. But Alpha Squad had no such reservations. Without waiting for orders, the clones opened fire. The forest exploded with blaster fire, the deafening noise blending with the shrieks of nearby wildlife. The child Jedi screamed in pain, her small body collapsing as the blasters hit home. And then, as quickly as it started, the carnage shifted direction. One clone fired at his brother, another turned on the third. Blasters cracked in the thick air as Alpha Squad self-destructed in a blaze of violence, each trooper consumed by the madness they had been suppressing for so long. Guilt, rage, fear, they turned on each other in a bloody frenzy. The trees stood tall and indifferent as clone armor shattered, helmets were ripped off, and soldiers, once brothers, tore each other apart. Hours later, the forest fell eerily silent. Only Commander X-536 remained standing, surrounded by the broken bodies of his squad. His blaster was limp in his hand, his armor cracked and stained with blood, both his own and his brother's. Before him, the young Jedi lay gasping for breath, her lightsaber flickering weakly in the dirt. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, not with hatred, but with sorrow. X-536 dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of everything he had done. He pressed the cold barrel of his blaster against his temple, his hand trembling as visions of every Jedi he had killed flashed before his eyes. He could feel the forest around him, ancient and unmoved by his suffering. The jungle didn't care, just like the Republic, just like the Emperor. The voices of the dead called to him, pulling him deeper into despair. But something stopped him from pulling the trigger. Not courage, not honor, just hollow emptiness. He wasn't even allowed the release of death. The clones had been built for one purpose, and once that purpose was fulfilled, there was nothing left. X5-36 let the blaster fall from his hands, its metallic clink swallowed by the forest. He stood slowly, turning his back on the wounded Jedi, leaving her to die or survive on her own. It didn't matter anymore. The galaxy was already dead to him. As he disappeared into the dense undergrowth of Kashyyyk, the jungle swallowed him whole, a fitting tomb for a man who had once been a soldier, but now was little more than a ghost.